When my students tell me that they want to have an American accent, I ask them, what do you mean? And no, I don't ask them that rhetorically. I actually ask them, what does that mean? Because there are so many different accents in the United States that it's hard to keep track of them all. As a matter of fact, here is a map of all of the different accents that we have throughout the United States. And even here where I live in the Midwest, there was something called a vowel shift. It was like the great Midwestern vowel shift that was the largest vowel shift that had happened in 1,000 years when it did happen the early part of last century. So we do get different accents and pronunciations throughout the United States. And when somebody says they want to sound like an American, that can be very, very different. If we look at the first video that I put on this channel and the guy from the South,
remember last time Daddy stopped at a gas station.
His accent's very different from mine from Chicago. Mine's different from somebody from New York.
And that our administration is going to take on the greed and corruption of the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical industry.
Compared to somebody from Boston.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Compared to somebody from Texas.
I shall not seek, and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.
Compared to somebody from California.
Because we all know from the time the polls open tomorrow morning until they close, every minute counts.
Or somebody from Seattle.
I want to thank Harvard for this honor. I'll be changing my job next year, and it will be nice to finally have a college degree on my resume.
We have so many different accents, and today I really wanted to bring this point home for two main reasons. One, when you're learning a language, don't worry about an accent. If you have an accent that is more of your native language, that's fine. As long as you are understood, that is what's most important. All these videos that talk about losing accents are making people so frustrated and worried about losing accents that they don't focus on the bigger goal of speaking English correctly. And we're going to actually go through a little quiz that New York Times has that shows where people's accents are from. So it's a quiz of 25 questions. And in this quiz, what they try to do is they try to pinpoint where you're from based on the word choices that you have, the accent that you have, the way you pronounce things. All right, but before we get into it, I want to show you where I am originally from, so it kind of gives you some context as to where you should be looking. So I am originally from around the Chicago area, but not from Chicago specifically. I was born in the town of Waukegan here. And let me go ahead and show you a clip of somebody else. His name's Jack Benny. He was a comedian in the middle part of the last century. And listen to how he speaks and see if you see any similarities between his accent and the way he talks and the way that I do.
On my radio show, you see, it's very difficult for me to get guest stars because, well, I don't pay much, you see.
Okay, comment down below if you notice if there was any similarities, if there were many differences. Remember, this is a clip from many, many years ago, so it might sound a little bit different. The accents in the United States have changed even within the last century. But I am from this area of Chicago originally, the Chicago suburbs. I then, at the age of 13, moved to Orlando, Florida, where I lived for 20 years. So my accent has been built from both living in the suburban part of Chicago and living in Orlando, Florida. Oh, and by the way, I did want to show one other video, or recommend one other video of this one Russian who has a YouTube channel, and he said that he actually learned English while he was in Tennessee. And what's interesting is you can actually tell in his accent that he has a little bit of a Tennessee twang to him.
You know, people were so friendly. You know, the nature was beautiful. The streets were clean. And a lot of my stereotypes about America came crushing down because what we've been taught when we were growing up.
So you can really see how he did learn it in Tennessee and how his accent developed from living in Tennessee. All right, so here's the quiz right here. And here's the first question. They always ask this question. How would you address a group of 2 or more people? And you see all of these answers. So throughout the United States, you will have all of these answers. Now, me, I would say you guys. Hey, how you guys doing? Well, actually, I would say you guys. How you guys doing? Wouldn't say y'all. That would be the South. But you can see there's a lot of other ones. In Chicago, a lot of people say yous. I don't. I say you guys. All right, so let's look at the next one. And as you can see right here, you can see a little map where the red, things are more similar, and in the blue, things are not often. So you can see right here in the Chicago area, it's much darker than in other areas. How do you pronounce the word Mary, Mary, and Mary? And as you can tell there, I pronounce all 3 the same. Okay, how would you pronounce aunt? To sound like ant, the word. This would be mine. But you have all these other different choices that show that there's a variation in accents. So there we go. Do you call the sweet spread that is put on a cake frosting or icing? I call it frosting. What do you call the night before Halloween? Now this one, we don't have a word for this. How do you pronounce the first syllable of lawyer? Loy, like boy. What do you call the insect that flies around in the summer and glows in the dark? Now, we could call it a lightning bug or a firefly. I more likely called it a lightning bug. What do you call it when it rains while the sun is shining? Now, I want to show you this one because it really does give an idea of how many different choices you have that are quite funny. So you have sun shower. You have the wolf is giving birth. You have the devil is beating his wife, a monkey's wedding, a fox's wedding, pineapple rain, liquid sun, but me, I have no term for this expression. What do you call a traffic situation in which several roads meet at a circle? I usually call it roundabout, and that might be because I watch a lot of British stuff, but I'm going to go with traffic circle. I think when I was younger, I would probably say traffic circle. What do you call the area of grass in the middle of some streets? I would call it a medium. Well, we could call it an island. I think that, see, and this is it. Is it a traffic island or an island? I just called it an island in most situations. I did live a little bit in Utah. Okay, I lived in Salt Lake City for 3 years. So that could have some impact on my word choice as well. What do you call a big road in which you drive relatively fast? Now, just call it a highway. How do you pronounce the word caramel? So I pronounce it with 3 syllables. What do you call a traffic jam caused by drivers slowing down to look at an accident or other diversion on the side of the road? Mine is rubbernecking is the activity, slowing down and gawking, that causes a traffic jam, but I have no word for the traffic jam itself. Well, actually, I would just call it a traffic jam. What do you call rubber sole shoes worn in gym class or for athletic activities? Just call them gym shoes. So there we go. And now, see, here you go. You have a totally different map in which the Chicago area and Cincinnati, interestingly enough, call them gym shoes. Okay, how do you pronounce crayon? 1 syllable, like man. What do you call the large wild cat native to the Americas? All of these would be fine. I mean, I call it by whatever specific. I really don't have a name for any of those. What do you call the small freshwater lobster found in lakes and streams? I don't have a word for this. What do you call the thing from which you might drink water in a school? And it can be between a drinking fountain and a water fountain. Really can be. I'm going to go with drinking fountain, I would more than likely say. How do you pronounce bin? So it's like bin. What do you call a drive-through liquor store? Now, I call it a beer barn. Now, there's a specific reason why. Because I did live in Florida for 20 years, in Orlando most of that time, but I did also live in Tallahassee, and I worked in politics and went to Tallahassee a lot. And there was a place called Mike's Beer Barn. And so it was the only time that I ever saw a drive-through liquor store, and it was Mike's Beer Barn. And so now I just call them beer barns. What do you call the area of grass between the sidewalk and the road? I really don't have a word for this. I can't think of a word that we really have for it. So see, other places actually have words for it. I would just say grass between the sidewalk and the street. What do you call the small road parallel to the highway? I would call it a frontage road. Okay, how do you pronounce the second syllable of pajamas? Jam, like jam. All right, question 24. What do you call the small gray bug that curls up into a ball when it's touched? And as you can see, you have a lot of choices. What do you have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and then other 14. We would call it a potato bug. And what is the distinction between dinner and supper? To me, I don't use the word supper. I only use dinner. Now, the one that they didn't show on here that they sometimes do is, what do you call a carbonated beverage? So in the Chicagoland area, they will call it pop a lot of time, but I never did. I called it soda. So it's common that both can be used. So let's look at the results and let's see how accurately it can show where I'm from based on those answers. That's funny. That is really funny. So as I mentioned, I went to university at the University of Utah for a few years before I transferred to my eventual university. So I must have picked up some words from Salt Lake City. But as you can see here, it specifically is saying you are from the suburbs of Chicago. Now, let me even make this a little bit clearer. The last place that I lived before I moved to Florida was this town here called Algonquin. Now, according to the map that we just looked at, it said my accent was closest to Aurora, which is down here, and Rockford, which is over here. So Algonquin is essentially the midway point between Rockford and Aurora. And that just shows how accurate this is. It also shows that accents are different. Word choice is different. And you notice here that even the word choices that I had for certain things, it said a lot of times in Chicago and in the Chicagoland area, it wasn't used. So you don't want to be thinking about accent and all these other things as like the most important thing when learning a language. No, you need to make sure that a lot of what you're saying is correct, grammatically correct. You are using the right words. You are using the correct sentence structure. So I just wanted to show you this today to give you a little bit of an idea of how many different accents there are, like what's out there, what you can experience. Because to have an American accent, again, what do you mean by that? Thank you very much for joining me today. I will see you later on, and I hope you have a wonderful day. If you stuck around this long, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and I will have a new one out shortly. Not a new channel, a new video. Yeah. Have a good one. Bye-bye.